We're live with Joanna Penn here. Sorry for the little delayed start there. Some technical difficulties, basically just because I'm on my own and need Laura's assistance. And it's much harder when we're all working remotely now. So welcome, Joanna.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tara. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And yeah, we just sort of wanted to say off the bat that things are quite difficult in the world right now, and we kind of don't want to take away from that, but also we just want to like keep going as we are, and just we hope that everyone's safe and that we can kind of just give some advice about non terrible things that are happening. So we're just going to talk to Joanna and get all of her insights and everything. So you're incredibly well known in the indie community, and you've always been a really solid resource for information. But for anyone that maybe isn't familiar, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Joanna?
Sure. Well, I'm British for a start, so I'm in Bath in the southwest of England. I write nonfiction for authors as Joanna Penn, and I have a podcast, the Creative Penn podcast, which Kobo Writing Life sponsors. So we've been
Oh,
fans for many years. I also write fiction as JF Penn, F for Francis, and I've got about 32 books at this point. I first
wow.
self-published in 2008. So before the international Kindle, before Kobo, before so many of the things that we have now. So, and I've pretty much been talking about it since 2008. I left my job in 2011 to go full time, and I make a multi six-figure income as a creative
Wow.
author entrepreneur. So I've kind of done everything over the years and continue to experiment with new forms of creativity and publishing. And yeah, and I've been on Kobo since the beginning.
Nice.
So yeah, very, very happy to share today.
Yeah, you're always a very good spokesperson for us. We always appreciate it. So when you've been publishing since 2008, what made you go into indie publishing in the first place?
Well, I've basically run my own businesses since around the year 2000. So I guess 20 years now. Oh, gosh, it makes me feel
Wow.
old. So I was already a businesswoman when I decided to write a book, and I was implementing financial systems into corporates at the time, which is just, deathly boring. So I wanted to change my life. So I wrote this book, which is available as Career Change. I wanted to change my career. And when I looked at the publishing industry, as it was then and still really as it is now, I just went, why does it take so long to do anything? And also, I'm a very sort of can do person, and the control of just getting it out there is what I liked, even back then when it was print thousands of books and put them in your garage, self-publishing era. And then as things, every single year, we get more and more stuff that's exciting that helps indie authors reach the world. Through Kobo Writing Life, in fact, I've sold books, I think 144 countries now, something like
Oh,
that.
wow. I
So
do always enjoy seeing your KWL map. It's so
yeah, my
impressive.
map. And you guys still the only people with a map on the dashboard. So good on you. I love it. And I think because I'm British, and when I started, I was in Australia. I'm also a New Zealand citizen. My family's all
Oh,
around the
wow.
world. Yeah. So I'm basically very international. My sister-in-law's Canadian. I've got another sister-in-law from Nigeria. So I've got this very international mindset. So from the beginning, I was always determined to get my books out to the whole world, and also understood this was, remember, like 2008, we were only just getting into the iPhone. I mean, it's crazy how technology has changed, but social media was just kind of kicking off. And so I realized that I could use these online tools to reach people all over the world, and that was not what publishers were doing. They're
Mhm.
still very territorial. So what I love about being indie is being able to upload my books to all these places, and I have, because I own the worldwide rights, I can sell them all over the world, and even from my own website, which I do as well. So it gives me freedom is probably my number one value, and that being an independent is so important to me, really.
Yeah,
Oh,
nice.
just to say, I do have some traditional publishing deals for foreign rights, and would definitely do other traditional publishing deals if the contract was what I was looking for. So I'm certainly not saying that, it's not worth doing. I'm just saying, dependent on what people want, that's a good way to consider it.
Nice. And so indie publishing has for such a long time been predominantly about ebooks. But now we're kind of seeing a move into different formats, especially with audio. And you have a book that's out, Audio for Authors, that's right behind your shoulder. um, what do you think has kind of led to this change, or what's caused the appetite for audiobooks to be so big right now?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things in terms of audio popularity, and what we've seen in the last 7 years, I think it is, the Audio Publishers Association has seen double-digit revenue growth in audio, and realistically, the main thing is the smartphone. That has really changed people's behavior with audiobooks, because I used to listen when I was a kid, and you get the tapes and you put them in, and of course they've been accessible for people with visual difficulties, but this has made them mainstream. And I also think the crossover with podcasting has helped, and this has also helped in the demographic, because it used to be that, again, hearing books were for a certain demographic, and then if you go to a library, that's another demographic. But now anyone, pretty much anyone in the developed market has a phone in their pocket, and so the speed of download is really important. That has changed. So all of this stuff has meant that audio has become more just used in so many ways. Like, all the news outlets have a little podcast, and things are just appearing in audio in the same way that maybe a decade ago we start to see everything arrive in audio. I think Kobo started in 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kobo Writing Life was 2012, and
Yeah.
then Kobo was 2009.
2009, yeah. So we're really looking at a sort of the decade of ebooks, and digital has now morphed into audio. And what we're seeing in some markets is that audiobooks are overtaking ebook sales, and they're not necessarily cannibalizing sales, but there are sales of other things. So, for example, personally, I listen to a lot of nonfiction on 1.5 speed, and then I'll also buy the paperback or the hardback to keep as a sort of extra, or I might listen to an audio drama, and that might lead me to buy another book. So I think what I want people to consider with audio is it's not a replacement, in the same way that we, ebooks, certainly some genres like romance are very heavily ebook dominated, but in nonfiction, I find I sell lots of audio, lots of print in all different formats: large print, hardback, paperback, and ebooks. So this is what's so exciting. We can do all of this now.
I love that you listen in 1.5 speed. I can't do that at all. It just
it depends what it is, but I think what happens is that over time you want to learn more. People just sound so slow when you listen to them at normal speed, and it's funny because I think you also step it up. I was at 1.25 and now I'm at 1.5, but some of the apps now go up to like 3x.
I can't do it. Have you ever slowed anything down? Like, is that an option too?
Yeah, you can slow things down. But that's, and it's funny because I narrate my own nonfiction audiobooks now as well. Like, Audio for Authors is self-narrated. And it's funny because when I'm narrating it, I'm thinking someone's just going to speed this up.
Yeah.
Which is funny.
If I ever narrated anything, that would be the use of the slowing it down, because just the Irishness in me is to just talk very quickly.
I love your voice.
Even now, though, I'm like, oh no, I'm telling myself to speak slowly. So I see we're having people join there. So hi to Media's in Toronto. We're in Toronto here as well. Susan's in Ottawa. We've got Rich coming from New York. Tracy's in Montreal. Hello to everyone that's there. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them throughout, and then Joanna and I will sort of pick and choose, or I will, as they're coming up, and then we can discuss at the end as well. So yeah, what you're saying about audio, I really like. It's very interesting to me how audio is so similar to what ebooks were like 10-ish years ago, about how it's like this new market, but that's not new. Like, books have always existed. Like, I remember going to the library as a kid and picking up like books on tape. But yeah, it's interesting that it's kind of changed into such a popular kind of new-ish media. So for an author that's considering audio, what's your advice? How do you weigh up investing your time in that, or when does it really work for an author to move into audio?
Yes, well, of course, it is an investment. however you look at it, it's an investment. So if you're a new author and you're just writing your first book, and then maybe just leave it for now, unless you have a budget. So you're either going to need a budget of money, or you're going to need a budget of time. And like, we can talk about self-narration in a minute if you like, but it's generally not recommended. Like 95% of authors do not narrate their own audiobooks for good reason.
Yeah.
But although it's much more common in nonfiction, obviously. But in terms of when it's worth it if you already have an audience. So if you're more of an established author, maybe you've got 5 books, maybe you've got 10 books, or maybe you've got a book that's selling really well in digital, then essentially you could take some of your royalties from the sale of the books and use that to invest in your audiobook. The other thing is, it's really going to depend on genre, because, for example, for nonfiction, what's so interesting is listeners are not so price sensitive. And so if there's a 3-hour audiobook, they might just buy it. Whereas my husband only listens to fantasy audiobooks that are over 40 hours long.
Oh,
because
wow.
yeah, that's the type of listener he is. Whereas I'm the type of listener who's like, wow, that looks really interesting. It's only 2 hours long, but I'm going to buy it anyway. So what you've got in the audio market are all these different types of listeners. So but the thing is, the price to get a 2-hour audiobook made to a 40-hour audiobook is very, very different. So what you've got, so you're, let's say an average of $250, what's that, 300 Canadian or something.
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah, something like that per finished hour, and then multiply that by 40. You better have a best-selling fantasy novel to actually get that made. So that's if you're paying up front. Now, both the big providers, ACX, which is obviously Amazon's, and then Findaway Voices, which is what distributes to Kobo Writing Life Audio. Of course, people can upload directly to Kobo Writing Life Audio as well. But if you want to find a narrator, so let's take Findaway. Findaway will help you find a narrator. They also have Voices Share, and ACX have a royalty share deal too, where basically Findaway's one, you can pay a percentage up front and then share royalties for a certain amount of time. You can even buy out the narrator if it's going well. So I think that model is pretty good. But again, a narrator has to consider your book to be worth doing. So you have to have quite a good platform to do it. And then the third way, well, of course, you can license your audio rights, and there are lots of fantastic audio production companies. So you might consider that for a royalty. Make sure you do it for a limited amount of time and possibly a limited market as well, territorially, but definitely limited time. And then the other way is to do it yourself, like I do. I've been podcasting for over a decade, so I have an audience who know my voice, and I've worked with a voice coach, and I have a technical person who helps me with the production. So it can be worth self-narrating if you have an audience, if you have the right book and the willingness to learn some skills.
Yeah, I think with self-narration, it really works for nonfiction when you're the when you're the expert in your field of what you're doing. And I was at a conference recently that they had a great example of, like, if you're considering narrating your own book, how about you take your book, sit in a closet and just read out loud for an hour. And if you can get through that, then maybe you can do your own book. Yeah. But if that's really painful and you can't act the things, then it's probably not for you.
Yeah, although with self-narration with fiction, there are 2 main schools of narration with fiction. One is the acting, try and do voices, try and be the character. And the other one is the storyteller, which someone like Neil Gaiman is an expert in, which is, and I have done for some of my short stories, which is you don't try and act, you don't try and do an Irish accent, you don't try and do things that you can't do. You just tell the story in a way that a parent might tell a child. And so that, I think, I just want to encourage people with that too, because we are moving into this time where audio is so... it's just such a growth market that it's worth doing. The other thing is, as an independent, like if you go through Findaway, if it's really, really terrible, you can just upload new files.
It just replaced everything.
Yeah, this is what's so great as indies, but
Yeah.
but if you sign an exclusive deal with anyone, or you sign another, you might not have a choice. I mean, for you, we talk about you being Irish. I had a friend who had a traditional publishing deal for audiobooks, and they had a person who basically read it like a leprechaun. And we were like, that's a terrible Irish accent, and it kind of ruined the book.
It was just like top of the morning to
Yeah,
you.
that's what it was, and that was not what it was meant to be. So I think it doesn't, as indies, we strive to be as professional as traditional publishers are, and we use our kind of ability to move quickly as an advantage, but we still want to have fantastic quality.
Yeah. So do you narrate your fiction as well as your nonfiction?
I've done some short stories, and I might do some more. I keep moving towards it and then stepping back and then moving.
I was reading I was listening actually to your audio for authors, and I thought it was really interesting because you're such a front-facing kind of public person. Like, you're on podcasts, and I've like seen you at conferences and things like that. But you were saying that you've still never done like a live reading of your fiction, which it was just amazing. And I almost want to like ask you to do it right now, but
well, no. But what's interesting, so this might help people who write in different genres. So you're interviewing Joanna Penn. I'm here as Joanna Penn, but I rarely get interviewed as JF Penn, my fiction persona. And it's funny, it's not like I'm multiple personality disorder or anything, but anyone who writes fiction and nonfiction, there's a very different mindset with fiction. And I think the same in narration. What I found is I almost don't have a voice as an out loud voice as a fiction author. My fictional voice is silent. And that's really interesting to me. So this is something else I want people to consider, is how much audio will help your writing grow. So for example, even if you're not going to self-narrate, you're going to have to adjust your book for audio, unless you understand writing for audio, which is something I'm trying to educate people on. And so you have to really understand these types of things. For example, with fiction, we're encouraged to say, oh, just write, Tara said, Joanna said, and the word said disappears in writing when you're reading the page with your eyes. You skim over it. But in a narration, the repeated sound becomes very noticeable. So you do have to rewrite things for audio if they're not clear. So I think that's actually a good skill for both fiction and non-fiction.
Yeah, I think
that's sorry,
good advice.
Sorry, I just saw there Wayne Stinnett's here, and he said my narrator has changed the way I write, and absolutely. And I found by self-narration, I have changed the way I write, and I think it's made it all the better because it makes it, the fiction is more lyrical, is more, not literary. I don't write literature, I write thrillers, but it's made my writing better for both genres.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's something that I kind of people might not have realized, because they are kind of separate, but you would just think that an audio is just one direct version of like a normal narrative book, but that they have to be kind of, it improves your writing and can be considered differently. So you talked a little bit about kind of how authors can produce audiobooks. But what are your tips when like trying to find a narrator? Like, is it really based on the story? Is it, do you chase who's the popular narrator right now? Like, what's your advice to authors?
Yeah, well, one, listen to some audiobooks in the genre that you're trying to look for, and you might just find somebody that way. It will also depend where you are in your journey, because the top narrators, if you're like, oh, I want that person who narrates Stephen King or whatever, that person's going to be expensive, and that person will probably be booked up for months and months to come. So by all means, especially right now at the time we're speaking, there might be lots of narrators who are looking for work, and there are narrators with home studios who do a lot of this stuff, and a professional narrator can do a book pretty bloomin' fast, but that will cost you. So yeah, by all means, if you have the budget, pitch the top narrator in your niche, but otherwise it's actually quite difficult, because the voice that you have in your head is probably your voice when you're reading it yourself as the author. And it's quite hard to find potentially somebody to read it. So for example, my arcane thrillers are read mainly by Veronica Giguère, who is an American female narrator, whereas I'm English. And in my head, originally, my books were read in an English voice. But now Veronica is my narrator for that series. And this is another thing, if you write a series, it's a good idea to have the same narrator across the series, because people follow narrators as well. So once they get into it, they might stick around for the narrator. So cost, and also then you get interviews, like auditions. So you upload some of your text. Make sure that text is representative of the book. So maybe there's the male character and the female character, or if it's nonfiction, it's got quotes in and different things. And then you'll get the auditions and you can make a decision. Now, again, it's very difficult. So you can get help. So Find Away Voices particularly will help match narrators as well. And this is the other thing. If you don't listen to a lot of audio, your ear may not be as attuned, I guess, as people who listen to a lot of audio, and they might just go, yeah, I know that narrator, they'd be really good for this. And that's what I find. People in the industry have been listening to voices and know the voices. So definitely networking, talk to other authors in your niche. And also it's a way of cross-selling. If you use a narrator that someone else in your niche uses, that might be good as well.
Yeah, Wayne has a comment there that Nick Sullivan was his 63rd audition for his first one. So I guess patience and persistence is key.
Definitely. And remember, the narrator is a bit like, in terms of the freelance aspect, a narrator is like an editor. They are a professional, and you have to respect the professional for the job they do. And so I've spoken to people on both sides of the equation, and authors can be a nightmare to work with. And in the same way, some narrators can be a nightmare to work with. So please, when you work with a narrator, respect their professionalism. Please communicate openly and honestly, but also you're hiring someone to do it's like an adaptation of your work. It will not match 100% what is in your brain. Yeah. You have to, accept that they're going to do a job. And, once you've listened to the thing and you've signed the contract, you're in it. Respect the professionals.
Yeah. Rich has a question there saying, do you think that the screenplay format is better for audiobook writing? Have you ever written in that format?
I have written screenplays, and this is a really interesting question and something I'm thinking a lot about at the moment. So the audiobook format is a piece of work that exists as an audiobook and a book. So it's an audio version of a book. A audio drama, or some of the other pieces that are coming out now on let's say take the BBC drama, which is one of the most famous things in the world. Those audio things are written as audio screenplays. So this is the difference. There's a very different type of writing when you're writing for an audio drama than when you're writing an audio book. And I've written screenplays for the screen, but none of them have been produced. So I have actually thought that I should adapt them to the audio drama format, because, for example, and you open the shot on this small farmhouse. Well, that doesn't work in audio. You have to have the noises of some chickens and some horses or whatever. So you have to rewrite with sound effects, basically. But I have definitely thought this for my screenplays, is adapting them for audio drama. And this is where I think several people have said, what about the future of audio books? And I think we have to start thinking more imaginatively and more creatively about what audio is. And this is something I think indies will get into as well, because it's a lot cheaper to produce an audio drama than it is to produce a film. So what you can do is write an audio drama. You can submit it to the big agencies. This can be paid work, and it's much cheaper to produce. So you can potentially get big names doing your work if you license that. But I definitely think the moving into writing for audio first is going to be a big thing.
It's kind of like a radio play, right? Versus kind of just writing a standard book. Yeah. I do like that people are experimenting so much with audio. And I know like Malcolm Gladwell is like a huge name and he has his own podcast, but I loved his latest audiobook because because it's nonfiction, and he had interviews, and he uses the actual audio from the interviews, and it was just like an 8-hour podcast, which like I absolutely loved, and thought it was really interesting, and I hadn't like seen that before. So
yes, well, that's becoming a lot more common, the sort of background stuff, and I think we just have, because we're authors and we're really locked into the the audio, the book format, and that's the thing we write first.
yeah,
And then we turn it into audio. Whereas this is a different mindset shift, which is I'm creating an audio project, and maybe there's a book that would go with it, but you don't publish the script of the audio drama, but maybe
yeah.
then novelize the audio drama, or we take some of our novels and turn those into. I just think this is another potential creative project, and I just love all this stuff. I really do.
Yeah, Marina just reminded me there. Hi, Marina. She's on our Kobo Writing Live team as well. That it sounds similar to some Kobo Originals content. So we have a Kobo Originals team, and last year they put out Charles Dickens. I can't remember the Christmas Carol, I believe.
Carol,
Yeah. But it was a Soul Pepper Theater. So it was like we went to see the play, and then all of those actors that were in the play actually created the audiobook. So it was kind of like multicast and kind of hourly sounding really good. Like it wasn't just a straight up read. So yeah, it's been nice to see like the different experimentations going on.
Well, and this kind of leads into a bit of a futurist thing. I'm just going to get into it now. We can come
Do
back
it.
to the other questions, but the what is also happening is the voice synthesis market
Yeah.
is started. So I actually had a phone call the other day. I've got a voice double, and which is an AI which has been trained on my voice, which will
Oh wow.
speak words I write. You haven't got to that bit in the audio, but yeah, I tell you where it is. I've got a whole page on my website, yeah, with my voice double, and it's based on me. You'll hear it and be like, oh, that's weird. But basically, this is what's coming. And they reckon it's going to be within a year, 2 years. I mean, it's only been in the last. It was meant to launch at London Book Fair, but of course the news has got buried in all of this. But there are now AI narrated audiobooks on. I don't even know if they're on Kobo, but they're through Findaway. Findaway just is part of it. But essentially, the AI voices now have emotional tone, and this is the thing that has been missing. Although, to be honest, I listen to some audiobooks and I'm like, is this an AI? Because sometimes they sound appalling. But the point is, okay, so I don't narrate anyone else's books but my own, but I want to have a voice that you can license to read my audiobooks. So if you write a book for authors, I'd love my voice to read it for an audiobook, but I don't want to do the work. I just want to license it, and I'll just get some kind of micro payment. So the idea is that within 2 to 5 years, I'm not going to say earlier than that, but we will have a license of voices that you can use to create different things. So you could either do it for an audiobook or for an audio drama. You could actually license those actors' voices and kind of direct them on whatever tool we use. But what I want people to think is the price of audio is going to come down dramatically, in the same way that we have tools like Vellum, or we can easily publish ebooks now, which we couldn't a decade ago. Now we're getting more and more tools, and the voice synth market is going to make it even easier to create audiobooks. So that's something that's coming. And if you're sitting there listening to this and you think, I definitely can't afford audiobooks right now, well, give it a year or 2 or 3 and write some books, so that when this market matures, you'll be able to do that. And the other exciting thing is there are lots of narrators in English language, but other markets, other languages around the world don't have the market we have. So essentially, this type of AI voice is going to mean that lots of other languages can have books in audio.
Nice. That's really exciting. Like we've definitely been watching it at Kobo. Like that's like something we're all like really on the edge of our seat. We found that like the audio, it's like almost there, but it's not quite there. Like if you listen to some of the books that we have right now for an extended period of time, you can kind of tell the tone that it's a computer. And one thing I thought was really interesting is that most of them tend to be British accents. So I'm just like, I wonder, is it that like North American listeners respond better to like a British accented AI? But yeah, I'm excited to see, because it's definitely coming. It's just a matter of like when the technology is going to catch up.
Yes, and Rich just asked what companies. Descript.com has a facility that they are working on, and the company that just did something with Findaway is deepzen.io. And if you just go to deepzen.io or Google that plus Findaway, you should get the press release. It literally was 2 weeks ago. It was meant to be London Book Fair, which of course got cancelled.
Yeah.
There we go. Anyway, that's a bit about the future, but I guess we should circle back to now.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to get your take on marketing an audiobook. Seeing as the readership is different, does the author say that they have their finished product ideally releasing together? Because I know that seems to be kind of the best way to kind of like double whammy your marketing. But what are the different tactics between marketing to this like different audience?
Yeah, sure. So yes, releasing at the same time is a really good idea. I certainly did that for audio for authors, and it went live on Kobo and on Storytel and everywhere except Audible.
Oh
So
no!
yeah, because they have a real backlog at the moment, but I'm also selling it direct. So yes, having it available on the same day. But this is something really funny, because this is something that we indies, we can do, but we are sometimes a little bit impatient. So we'll just upload the ebook, make it go live, and then we might do the print book and the audiobook much later. Of course, it's fine to do it later, especially if you're still budgeting. But yes, having it go live at the same time is great, because, and this is the main thing, you don't know what a reader prefers. So any kind of marketing is going to sell all formats. So if you're on a podcast or you're on a Facebook Live interview, then someone's listening. There are people listening who prefer a paperback, and there are people listening who prefer audiobook, and people listening who prefer ebook, and whatever device they're on in whatever country they're in, which is why I'm wide pretty much with everything, because I want to reach all those readers in every format in every country. So having all of the formats linked together as much as possible would be great. I think having a page, whenever you have a book page on your website, you should have all your different formats linked there. And also you can use something like books2read.com, which Draft a Digital make, which is just one link that you can use on social media, which goes to all the different things. And that now includes audiobook links. Yeah. That's obviously still in development, but it's pretty good. I'd say it's like 80% there. It's better than nothing, better than trying to share 200 links.
Yeah, especially as you're like expanding your offering, that you're just going to have links to like everything. So it's extremely handy having just one.
It is. And then the other thing is using audio to sell audio. So the reason I sell so much nonfiction audio is because I have a nonfiction podcast, and because a lot of the interviews I do are as Joanna Penn. So I naturally sell more audiobooks and ebooks and print books as Joanna Penn. So having you don't have to start a podcast though, people. Remember, what you can do is pitch podcasters. So do your research in your niche, and it doesn't need to be just about the topic of your book. Like fiction authors in particular are terrible. They're like, oh, I just have to be on like a thriller author discussion podcast. No, what you want to do, I think Wayne Stinnett, who's on the call, writes about boats. I think that's right, Wayne. Sorry if I'm wrong, but boats and, the sailing community. So it's a very obvious thing to try and be on sailing podcasts that have like a not necessarily fiction podcast. And for example, with my books, I've been on psychology podcasts because my fiction has a lot of psychology in. Travel, I've got another travel podcast, the Books and Travel podcast, which is trying to kind of tap into that market. You can also think about who you are. So, for example, if you're right now, everyone is a stay-at-home parent in those areas with where you're at home with kids. But if you are, say you are a stay-at-home mom, or mompreneur, that's a good example. Or maybe you love gardening. Just think about all the different things that make up you and the topics of your book, and then go look for podcasts and then pitch for the podcast interview. Everyone's looking for content, and if you can do a decent interview, and just a little tip, a decent interview involves intonation in your voice and smiling. People can hear a smile in your voice. There are lots of ways to make yourself engaging, and then people go, oh, I really enjoyed that interview, I think I'll check out the book. And maybe they, whatever format they get, if they are listening to a podcast, they are more likely to be an audio listener. I certainly, if I hear someone interviewed on a podcast, the first thing I'll do is go look for the audiobook, and I get really annoyed if there's no audiobook, and it's surprisingly common.
Wow.
Very annoying, even with, you know, on big podcasts, you know, people not having them. So that's a couple of ideas. Obviously you can also do ads and stuff, you know, Facebook ads, all the ads, BookBub ads. Oh, BookBub now have Chirp ads, which is only in some territories. But a couple of other things, make sure you email your list, obviously, and then add into your autoresponder series that you have audio. And if you can tag people on your list for audio, then do that. Then you can market to them specifically. And the other exciting thing is to say, you can get my audiobooks for free and my ebooks for free and my print books for free if you go to the library or if you order them on your library app. You can only do this if you are wide with audio and ebooks and print books. But basically, and this again is through Findaway, the paper checkout model means that libraries and patrons of libraries can get ebooks and audiobooks for free, and you still get paid, which is fantastic. And also public lending right, which you have in Canada, we have in the UK. Sorry, Americans, you don't have it, but those of us in the Commonwealth do. We get paid for that lending as well. So it's extra money in your pocket. So in the past, I think we've discounted libraries. We're like, oh, I love libraries, but I want to get paid, you know, but now you do get paid. So that's a really good call to action is, hey, you can get my books for free. Just check on your library app or ask your librarian to order them. So those are just some ideas. I mean, there are tons and tons of ideas, basically.
That was great. There's so many there. I do think, yeah, I guess like coming back to the main one of making your audiobook available. And because we have the direct upload at the moment, but it's not widely available because we're just sort of rolling it out slowly. So if anyone's interested in direct upload on Kobo Writing Life, just send the team an email at writinglife@kobo.com and we'll make sure you have access to that. And we're like hosting it all in-house, which is why we can kind of get the books published up so quickly. So it's, I mean, we say 24 to 72 hours, but it's usually up within a day, like once it goes through, which for audio files is crazy fast. So just letting everyone know about that. And you talked about your podcast, which is incredibly popular, the Creative Penn. And we mentioned at the beginning that we're proud sponsors. Love listening to it. Why do you think that podcasting has become so popular recently? Because it's another medium that, I mean, I've been listening to podcasts for 10, 12 years, and now it seems like everyone and their sister has a podcast, which is the name of Steph, our podcast hosts, other podcast. Everyone has their own thing. Why do you think it's become so popular?
Well, there's kind of the tipping point for podcasting was, I think, around 2015 when Serial sort of hit the news. And again, it's the smartphone penetration is a big deal. Gotta love you millennials. I'm sure you're a millennial, Tara. You're like a decade younger.
I actually like to use the term an old-ennial because I remember, like, I like to say I've coined that, but I don't know if I have. But I think if you can remember when there was no internet, you're on the older end of millennial.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I'm Gen X, definitely no internet. But it's funny because I think that's the market that has really helped podcasting. And it's funny because I went to Frankfurt Book Fair, the audio summit last year, and they were saying, young people, you know, under the age of 60 are listening to audiobooks, and they were kind of stunned. And it's because, you know, those of us of the, well, pretty much everyone now has got their phone. And I mean, especially as we're talking in the time of COVID-19, which it shall be known as in the future, this weird time, we're going to have probably a lot more downloads of podcasts, a lot more downloads of ebooks and audiobooks and things as people consume without being able to get their print stuff. Commuting, which is not happening right now, but commuting is a huge time when people listen. But also what's interesting is people do listen at home. Like I listen to podcasts podcasts when I'm cooking. People have found it's a way to get away from the screen time almost. You're still attached to your device, but you're listening rather than watching. And it's actually like, it's my preferred method of consumption. I mean, we're on video here, but maybe some people are going to listen to it on audio, and I certainly prefer to listen.
Yeah, we'll be having this on the Kobo Writing Life podcast as an episode in the future, so it'll just be audio.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this, we spend so much time in front of computers and the visual light and everything, that having audio is just another way to learn or to be entertained. Like my husband really loves comedy podcasts. So there's all different reasons why people listen. But what I would say is, if you're listening, you know, as an author, that's why pitching is so good. And because there are so many niches now. And as you say, obviously the difficulty is many podcasts have no listeners at all, and or very, very few, but it's a good way to start with a small podcast, to be honest.
Yeah.
You don't want to go day one to like the Tim Ferriss show.
No.
That'd be great for all of us, but you know, you have to start small, and then build up to the podcast, and of course keep pitching as well. Like there's people who pitched, Dave Chesson from Kindlepreneur is a good example. He actually, when he finally came on my show, he said, "Do you realize I pitched you like 4 years ago and you said no?" Really? Things have changed over 4 years, Dave. You're now Dave from Kindlepreneur, so fair enough. But this is the thing, over time, you will change, your podcast will change, and also I would suggest, and I have a bit of a rule, which is I won't go on a podcast that has fewer than 30 episodes, because many podcasts don't make it to 10 episodes.
Right, yeah. People don't realize that how much work is involved in them.
Oh,
I think,
so much work.
Yeah, we're creeping up on 200 episodes of the Kobo Writing Life, so I'm excited about that when we hit it.
Yeah, I'm almost at 500.
Oh, wow. So I know you were talking about kind of looking at different niche podcasts for people to be on, but what is your kind of advice, or what are the best writing ones out there that you enjoy listening to?
Oh, that's really an unfair question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, because I'm in the podcast niche, and like I have so many friends who are podcasters that I can't possibly answer.
Oh, forgive me. Sorry.
That question. I mean, let's just say the Kobo Writing Life podcast is an excellent podcast, and people should listen to that. They should also listen to the creativepenn.com.
Absolutely.
And all my friends, I love you all, but it's, you know, it's very hard to pick them out. And I think that's the other, what I would say is how I behave on my app now is I will use the search bar to find stuff. So I use Apple Podcasts, and essentially I just use, if I'm, for example, right now you might be searching for COVID-19, and if you type that in, you're going to get a whole list of different shows. And then a bit like sampling on ebooks, what I do is I'll download an episode and I'll give it, you know, 5 to 10 minutes. And if I don't like it, I'll ditch it. So for me, I've changed my behavior much more to preferring to listen to different shows on the same topic, rather than I often change up the shows I listen to depending on the topic I'm learning about. So that's another shift in behavior. I used to only listen to the same shows all the time, and now I kind of dot around listening to topics. Yeah,
I think I do the same sort of thing, actually. It's just like sometimes you just pick episodes of certain shows. So I guess it's important that you're kind of tagging your stuff correctly, and like metadata always being key.
Podcasting metadata is hugely important, but of course you only control that if it's your podcast. What I would say is making sure to repost if you can. So what I will probably do once you guys put this live is I will also have a thing on a transcript on my website with the links to all the shows, and it promotes your podcast, but it also promotes me. It also makes it more SEOable, search engine optimized. And so anything you can do to make you more easily found is a really good thing. But learning how people behave on these devices is really interesting. Another one we haven't even had time to really talk about is voice search and voice assistants, and the kind of voice first community now, and how people search differently when they speak into their device rather than type into their device. And this is something, or even they ask their smart assistant
Yeah.
Hey Google, play the Kobo Writing Life podcast, or hey Google, find me an audiobook on whatever. And this is another thing, like Google Play has not been mega big for most people for a while, but now I think what we've got to start thinking with the voice assistants is, okay, how do people find me in all these different ways, on all these different platforms? Again, circling back to wide publishing,
Yeah.
that's another good reason why.
Yeah, and that sort of leans into that question then that Marina has about audiobooks as a tool for accessibility. And do you find that authors are focusing on providing content that is accessible, or was just this kind of like a nice bonus?
I think it's a nice bonus. I hate to say it, but I mean, there are obviously a lot of authors who very much care about making accessible content. And I've been doing show notes and transcripts for years, but being honest, it's been for SEO and has had the side benefit of accessibility. And what's so funny is so many people have told me they never listen to my podcast. They only ever read the transcript, which is a shame because they're missing out on a lot of stuff, which I don't put in the transcript.
But it's good that you have the option there for both. Like, it's
Exactly.
nice. Yeah. So with the kind of current state of the world at the moment, we're kind of going to be seeing a lot more online events, I think, in the immediate few months. Nobody can tell what's going to happen. But podcasting must make it kind of easier for you to have more experience with like kind of online events like that. Do you think that there'll be more kind of digital conferencing, and kind of what do you think is kind of good advice for best practices around this?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I was saying to you before the call, my life and many professional authors has probably not changed that much. I mean, we can't go other places, but most of our work is in the house. And I've been doing podcasting for over a decade on Skype and, this type of thing. So probably in terms of doing more of this, yes, I think there will be more. However, I think it's got really noisy and is going to get more noisy. Like if everyone goes online with these amazing offers, we're all just going to be inundated. So I believe that once this time has passed and they have figured out how we can all get on with life and not just die, then I think we will be back to physical events. But what I hope is that physical events more of them might offer the digital pass, which we have seen happen in the internet space, but has not become so popular elsewhere. I would also like to speak more. Like I've spoken to a conference via Skype before, and it's really hard. It's especially to do a keynote. You're like, oh my God, I'm some big head on a screen. It's just awful. But I'm really hoping that this crisis will bring about virtual reality in a much better way. So I would love to be able to speak at more conferences in America, Canada, all over the world. But the hassle of traveling, even without COVID-19 can be difficult. So I think this will bring on a new era of, like, the virtual reality thing has been dancing around the edges for years, but this could really help make it mainstream, or if not complete virtual reality, something a lot better than this.
Yeah. Would you, you're going to go like Tupac and have a hologram Joanna Penn?
Yeah, basically. But I think there's going to be huge investments. There's been a couple of IPOs that have literally launched since COVID-19 kicked off because they've seen the future. Wayne said, Key West Mystery Fest 2021. Yes, Wayne, I'll be there in hologram.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I get asked to speak at a lot of these smaller group events, which is just it's just too expensive from the UK to do all this type of stuff. And I think there will be ways that we can do a lot more of this. So I hope that people will consider the audio and video experience to be much more of an important part of being an author. I mean, we've seen all the reports on author incomes. We know that multiple streams of income is much better than just relying on one thing. And this is marketing as well as potentially income. So I get paid to speak, but equally doing more speaking can help you sell books. So it can be lots of different ways to earn money. So I want authors to consider upskilling around this area, because let's face it, most authors are introverts. I'm an introvert. I joined the Professional Speakers Organization. I've done a lot of training. So you're not just born doing this easily. you have to practice. And I hope that people considering podcast interviews, considering professional speaking, will kind of upskill so that they can sell more books and also be more memorable, which is, you have to do this stuff. Sorry, people, you just have to do it.
Yeah, I do like the idea of having people that are hosting conferences as well a little bit more aware about having the digital packs, because it can also be costly to authors that don't have the means to travel to these things. So it's nice to be able to kind of broaden who you're kind of sending this information to. And it's something definitely that we consider. I'm like, kind of like, how can we kind of help people as much as possible without like physically being there? Yeah, is there any tips for kind of getting out of your shell? I know Kobo have Toastmasters that I found really helpful when you're starting to speak.
Yeah, Toastmasters is great. The thing that I would say overwhelmingly is you have to consider it's not about you. So, for example, whenever I speak, even just for this, so I've got next to me, serve the audience. Serve the audience is what you always think about when you're speaking. And the biggest issue, if you go to a literary festival, it's just terrible. You know, these authors with their noses in their books trying to read, and they're so obsessed with how they are feeling, but it's not about you. You're serving the audience. And that should be the same with a podcast interview. It's who are the audience and how can I best help them? And if you help them in hopefully an engaging manner, then they will remember you and they might check out your book. Like literally, that's what you've got to think. And it's not so much about getting over everything, you know, or, you know, and even having rapport, like with you and I, having some rapport, because people trust the host of the event most, and you're kind of the guest. So the host is also really important. So understanding your audience, I mean, these are things we should know as writers anyway, but it's really good to think, oh my God, I'm so nervous. Well, doesn't matter, because it's not about you. How can you best serve the audience?
That was the last episode of the Kobo Writing Life podcast we had out with a Toronto musician, Eamon McGrath, but he's also written a novel. His second novel is coming out soon. But he talked about the difference between, like, you know, playing a gig as a musician and then having a book tour. And he's just like, it was so hard. I had to like learn how to read my book.
Yes.
Like, and that's something that I think maybe people don't realize.
Well, that comes back to narration, you know, circling all the way back. And it may be that I will do more as JF Penn if I actually narrate my books, which that's almost why I'm considering it. Like, what have I got to lose at this point?
Yeah, would you license your own voice to do it? Or is that something that you'd be more comfortable with, do you think?
I will license my voice for nonfiction, and we'll see with fiction. But it's funny because I speak, the voice guys I was talking to at Descript, they actually said to me, you have a different voice as Joanna Penn than you do as JF Penn.
No.
And I was like, okay, they said, we have to build you 2 voice doubles because they're not the same. And I was like, whoa, maybe I am 2 people.
It sounds like you are. Oh, well, we've got a few minutes left. You kind of tipped on this a little bit in terms of audiobooks, but you do a great annual prediction at the start of every year. So I wanted to ask what you have for any predictions for the rest of this year or next year.
Well, that went out the window, didn't it? I think everything went out the window.
Well, now's your opportunity to give your updated.
Well, you know what? I think okay, circling back to the whole virus thing, people talk at the moment about the 5 stages of grief, and you know, the anger and the denial and then the acceptance of whatever, you know, this, how we're behaving now. But then the final one is meaning. The 6th stage is meaning. And thinking about, I think this will have a huge impact on authors. For traditionally published authors are going to see that they cannot rely on the print supply chain for their income. A lot of authors, I mean, 65% of Barnes and Noble stores are closed in the US. All of the physical bookstores in the UK are closed. So anyone relying on physical bookstores is going to be in trouble, because of course that money is going to come down the track. A lot of authors are having their book launches postponed, or they're being told, well, sorry, you just missed your slot. So I think a lot of traditionally published authors are going to go, I better put some books out indie. So I think we're going to have a wave of trad pub coming in. I think a lot of indies are realizing that they would like more streams of income. So I went, right, I'm going to sell direct hard now. Like, this is a change for me. I have sold direct for years, but I just went up and pimped my PayHip store, put my audiobooks up, and made, good money within 24 hours. Because the truth is, as much as I love Kobo and all the other stores, we don't get paid for 30 days, 60 days, however long, the various things are. But we certainly don't get money in 10 minutes, which is what you can get with selling direct on a store like PayHip, which is what I do. So that's a behavior change that I've noticed in myself already in 2 weeks. Is this, and also this, I don't care about ranking so much as I care about money in my pocket. This is also a big thing, because if you can turn on another income stream when something happens to get rid of another one, that's huge. I think more authors are going to be doing online stuff, like online courses, potentially doing virtual events, as you said. And I think just everyone's kind of questioning what is really important. And so I think we're going to see probably more people also writing books, which is great.
Yeah.
And also more people just changing the way they do things because they've considered what's really important in life. But I do think we'll probably, if this goes on for more than 3 months, then we're going to probably see publishers go out of business. Might see bookstores go out of business. But hopefully that won't happen. But I do see that there will be this difficult area of cash flow. And I mean, even I've heard that there's issues with paper supplies coming over the border. So we might, you can see how printing and the physical supply chain has been broken, but the digital supply chain is fine.
Yeah.
So people are still reading books. So that's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. And if not reading more now, I think kind of indies are always a little bit ahead of the curve on things. And I think they're definitely kind of in a good position, not having to rely on so many kind of physical books and things like that.
Definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. So is there any other questions that we have on the side there? Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we didn't cover in these last couple of minutes?
No, I mean, I think just to really encourage people, if you, and I kind of agree with you, indies are a bit ahead. I mean, I've been podcasting, for a decade. You've been listening for more than a decade. So I almost was like, sorry, how come people are finally catching up to podcasting and audiobooks? This is crazy. But the fact is, we are often ahead. And what I want people to realize is most people still haven't listened to an audiobook. Most people still haven't even read an ebook. And most people haven't listened to a podcast. So let's encourage people. That's why I think libraries are a really good way into people's minds, is, get it for free. And then if we encourage people to listen to any type of online stuff and buy online ebooks and audiobooks, that will help everybody and start educating people around what they can do with this. So I would just encourage people to think, look, this is still day one. With audiobooks, it's like 2011 with ebooks. It really is. We're just starting. Really.
I know. And some people sometimes get put off about not having been on the indie train immediately. They're like, oh, it's 10 years too late. But I completely disagree. There's something new always, all the time.
Yeah, no, day one. And I feel that, like 2008, I'm learning something new every single day. And like I said, I just spent last week just pimping my PayHip store. I'm always doing something new, always learning from people. And that's the other thing. As an indie, you need to be always learning and loving it. I love this. I've always loved it. I'm still loving it. That's why I'm still here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joanna. This has been terrific. And thanks for the time, and thank you for the questions that people have dropped into.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and come on over to the Creative Penn podcast if you like listening. And of course, thanks to Kobo Writing Life, who are a sponsor of my show, and I'm a very proud KWL publisher. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you guys all again soon.